We ready to get started? So now if we're expecting Yael today, should we be waiting for her?
I'll bring her.
Since it's 5 past, I guess let's just get started. Everyone remember to sign in. Looks like we have status updates. I can go first on this. It merges a bit into release planning. I made a couple small PRs, one to fix the build after we merged the Windows base image change, because we're pointing at a manifest list, which we can't do because of a bug in Imgutil. I also made the build faster while I was at it because it was bothering me that it could be sped up by caching, and it wasn't. I think we have everything that we need to cut 092. So I have a release branch for that. I was thinking we could get a draft release up today and get everyone to try it out and then release it tomorrow if there weren't any problems with it. That plan sound good to everybody? Awesome. That's it for me. Anybody else want to share?
I'm happy to. Thanks, Emily, for helping me out this morning on the PRs to Imgutil, sort of are pack related, but I guess it crosses over a little bit there. I was also going to add the issue to disambiguate or to deal with setting required properties on image constructors. So I'm still in the process of doing that. And I had a couple questions, but we don't have to, I can wait till after status updates.
I didn't do anything this week on lifecycle. The PR is still outstanding. I'm sure there'll be some feedback coming in. Sound like some folks have already started looking at it. So I look to kind of start re-implementing that on top of whatever version that is that we want to implement it on. As soon as we understand how to guard that code with the experimental stuff.
Anybody else? Cool. I think we sort of covered release planning for 092, then starting next week, focus on 010. The milestone for that should be up to date. The next specific item on this agenda I put here is docs. We talked about wanting lifecycle docs and some ideas for what could go into either the lifecycle repo or the docs website to help people with lifecycle, because we're really lacking in that department. I put this here to ask for help because I had sort of said that I would create some issues around that, but I feel like my to-do list is spiraling a little bit out of control, and the number of things I've said I would do is exceeding the number of things I can do. I was wondering if I could get someone here to volunteer to think about what sections of what content we need in terms of docs and make placeholder issues for it.
I am happy to help with that.
Thank you, Natalie. I really appreciate it. My fond hope is that we can get some issues in place and then decide some minimal set of those that we want to ship with O10. Because I think specifically, especially as we ship new APIs, helping people migrate is going to be important. Okay, next on the list, Mike, new image.
I tossed this one in here, and again, it might overlap a little bit with more pack use cases, but since Imgutil is consumed by both and we're making new images in lifecycle, I figured I'd bounce the idea off here. We're looking to make it easier for a new Imgutil image to have default properties set on it, potentially through the constructor rather than through a whole bunch of setters after you make a new empty image. This is, matters a lot for Windows, but will definitely matter a lot for ARM and alternate architectures. So I was wondering if y'all had ideas for what properties would be best to set via constructor, beyond just the biased ones that I have already. For a little more background, for a local image, it gets the operating system, architecture, and the OS version set from the daemon, but that's not true for a remote image. A remote image always gets Linux, x86, no OS version. And I feel like just making it easy to override those defaults feels like a good set to start with, but I don't know if y'all would want to see anything else there, at least anything captured in the issue.
I think on the daemon, we might need to also be able to set architecture and not just use the default, because Docker Desktop supports a heterogeneous architecture of containers, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of my dreams for new image is that from base, instead of taking a string that is a base, takes a image. And I think because of some of our limitations, we might have to make that such that, you know, on local, it can only take local, and on remote, it can only take remote. Like maybe someday we can be clever and let you create from other ones, but I think starting with enforcing that is fine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But then I wonder if maybe we want something that's like new empty, which is different, and then you create something from an empty image. I don't know.
Right, that's more of how GGCR goes about it with the.
Yeah, I feel like GGCR designed their interface perfectly, and we designed ours less than perfectly. And it'd be nice to be able to move closer to their interface. Like in an ideal world, I wish we could drop Imgutil and just use GGCR. But the problem is their daemon implementation. The performance problems there are not something we can live with.
Yeah. Even if we refactored platforms to use the daemon less, or it just is inherently very, very slow for everything we need it for.
If we didn't use the daemon as an image store, like as a target destination when we're creating images, we could delete Imgutil, which was an aspiration that I know Javier had at one point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're a long way from doing that. It'd be like an RFC and a lot of discussion that would happen there, and it's probably worth fixing Imgutil because we're not close enough to living in the world where we can get rid of it. Is my hot take there.
Yeah, I feel like that's good context for knowing what we want to work toward, in that sense. Because I was thinking for a sec, what if we added another kind of image that's on disk Imgutil as opposed to on daemon local, but that's kind of tripling down on Imgutil rather than the other
But it might
way.
be worth it. I feel like we might actually need an on-disk image. I'm surprised that Peck is doing a bunch of on-disk image things without that, right?
Yeah.
I guess for a while, because I wanted to get rid of it, we didn't invest in improving it, and getting rid of it has not happened nearly as fast as we thought it would. It might be worth, it might be worth doubling down. Like sometimes you got to invest in living in we got to decorate the house we live in, even if we want to move, something. I don't know what the analogy is.
Makes sense. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Thank you again. That's good context. Okay. So with that in mind, we can potentially.
Quick
Yeah, of course.
question. I'm sorry. You can feel free to like shut me down. But can you just help me understand how Imgutil is solving the performance problems that GGCR has? Like, what are we doing that's special?
So both of us use Docker save and Docker load to get a representation of the image. But the problem that GGCR has is when you're creating a new daemon image, so you're doing a Docker load, you need to have a file system representation of the entire image. And we allow you to have a partial file system representation of the image and take advantage of the fact that we know when Docker actually needs a copy of a layer and when it doesn't. So we cheat, and a lot of our layers are empty strings when we're loading an image into the daemon. And GGCR doesn't do that. And to actually get a full representation of the image where you're not cheating, a lot of times you need to Docker save a very large image to disk first, and that's very slow.
Especially over like a Docker host, right?
Is
Yeah.
there any chance for getting something like that into GGCR itself?
It's come up a couple times, and I've talked to, I'm blanking on his name now, but the GGCR guy who works at Google
Johnson
about it. Yeah, John Johnson. The problem is you have to be sort of context aware to know when you can cheat. So unfortunately, it'd be nice if you didn't have to load the layer if the daemon already had the layer. That'd make a lot of sense. That's what happens in the registry. That's not true in the Docker daemon. In the Docker daemon, it uses the chain ID to decide whether it needs to load the layer. So you need to load the layer if the daemon hasn't seen that exact chain of layers before. And because we're building our images from base images, this gets into the from base image thing, we assume that all the base image layers already exist. So we can use that context that doesn't exist in the GGCR interface to decide which layers to skip. The other thing we do is when we use our with previous image, as we reuse layers, we can compare with the previous image to decide if we've seen the chain ID before and then decide whether we need the layer. And previous image isn't like a core OCI concept, right? So that's not built into GGCR either. But they did have some ideas around solving the base image problem. I think that's the bigger one. The previous image problem we could get around with caching in other ways, but it hasn't. There's a couple issues. I think I mentioned them. I linked to them in an Imgutil issue that Micah created about this. Doesn't seem like they're going to make progress on it soon. Like we could try to fix it in GGCR for them, but it's probably a lot of work. I'll find the issue here. Hold on.
It was the one I made. I think I closed it.
Yeah.
Do we think there's room to sort of introduce like some hooks into GGCR somewhere to kind of like, image resolution or layer resolution hooks or something that they would just know up and, I don't know, like, is there some sort of small change we could, that you think they would allow through that would give us that flexibility so we could get rid of Imgutil in a lot of places?
Maybe.
Some sort of lifecycle hooks or something. Lifecycle hooks.
I think one of these issues that are linked here had an idea for this. It's sort of like a layer filter that you could set with the daemon, and it would then know whether it needed layers or not. Like it might be worth investing the time in fixing our problem in GDCR, and that we can move forward rather than fixing Imgutil. I'm happy with either one. Probably fixing GDCR is better, but if there's more risk, I don't know the code base as well, so I can't say, yeah, we could do that. Probably, but also like John Johnson started it and dropped it. I'm not quite sure why he dropped it. Might be worth reaching out to him. I think the other thing we have to do to improve daemon performance, but this one's easier, is do like some memoization of things. Because they don't store the image. They're always like, they pull it in and out and compress and decompress it more often than you really need to.
Maybe this is getting farther off the core issue, but do we know, does this overlap with the desire to use a lot of the CNB tools without a daemon? Like if we were to introduce a on-disk version of the image, just can it help us decouple more from the daemon in general? Or is it really just a speed optimization?
If we could decouple from the daemon in general, then we wouldn't have to solve this problem. We could sidestep the problem. It would be nice, I think, but there's some UX questions about whether we can avoid the daemon and still create a UX that people who are familiar with Docker find sufficient.
Okay.
In some ways, I like that best. Better than fixing GDCR or improving Imgutil is, can we just not with the daemon? But I'm not sure what the answer to that question is.
Right, we'd still need a API for, well, maybe it's just, yeah, I guess we still need some API for writing remote or dealing with whatever the alternative is, I guess.
I feel like we could use vanilla GDCR for both tarballs and registries. And then I guess what we do in the daemon case is spin up a local registry and then pull into the daemon to get it there in the end.
Makes sense.
Right.
I feel like we need a proposal to describe exactly what we want to do there and take votes on it, because it'd be a big change.
Yeah, and it's mostly a pack change, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because this, yeah, it'd be nice to get all that daemon code out of lifecycle, probably, or some of it.
Yeah. We could delete the launch cache. We could clean up a lot of stuff if we didn't have to support the daemon workflow.
I still need it to be as fast or faster, though. At least, you know, that's one of the big things. You don't want it to be any slower. Which I don't know. I guess it'd be hard to be much slower. But.
With our caching and our hacks, our daemon stuff, is pretty fast most of the time.
Yeah,
every now and then, it's very slow
cases,
though.
Yeah, we're like cache has been busted, and like now everything just takes forever. But
yeah.
Thanks for all the background. I know I have more questions that I'm probably going to ask in the pack chat at some point, kind of the history of how it went that way, but that's awesome. I'll continue with adding this issue about the constructor param. So.
Anything else anybody wants to talk about?
If I was ready to start in on stack packs, do we like the idea of doing multiple PRs that are guarded by experimental, like one for the detector, one for builder, or would we want one PR with like very explicit commits? Like I don't know what we want our commit and merge strategy to be here, so I'd like to kind of have some input here before I go off and do something that we don't like still. So like as far as like, I know it's a massive PR, so I just don't want to redo it 3 times.
I vote for multiple PRs. think it will be easier to review and we'll get better feedback this way.
Okay.
If we have a clear enough idea of what we want to do, I'm okay with multiple PRs.
Okay.
But it'll be worth noting that once we
spot.
merge one, we're gonna want them all before we ship.
Yeah, because the detector without the builder parts, like, you know, not really operational. I mean, other than creating a new set of files to be executed in some distant future. So that was my concern with doing multiple PRs. But as long as we're okay with the direction of the proof of concept PR, then I'm okay also splitting them out into multiple PRs. I don't know, Emily, I don't know if you've started your review on it yet or not. I wouldn't want to dive too hard into these distinct PRs if we decide to change some technical decisions on this, which I'm sure there will be.
I don't think it's worth doing the real implementation until we at least merge the RFC. Maybe until we have the spec change ready. I feel like a final version of this, I can't be comfortable merging into a life cycle until we at least know, until we have demonstrated consensus on the technical decisions and we know which API version is going in, right?
Okay. All right. Well, maybe we bring that up today in working group so Joe kind of knows what the plan is there. Because I think he was thinking that the experimental stuff would kind of mean that even if there's no consensus yet, it would kind of allow us to push forward with a experimental version of what we hope to accept, but even though it's not accepted. So if that's not what we want to do, if we're not comfortable merging even experimental unapproved RFC, then I just want to make sure that's clear to Joe so he knows.
Yeah, at one point that was my understanding too, but as the experimental API RFC has finalized, I feel like that's sort of not what's described there, right? If we're using the unstable or experimental feature clause in that, then those features are still documented in a particular API version that we release.
All right. Yeah, we can bring that up in working group just to make sure that Terrence and Joe have the same understanding. I've been kind of checked out on the experimental stuff. StackPack has really taken all the energy out of that, so I'm just kind of waiting for a decision there so I can wrap everything in some experimental code that doesn't exist yet. Yeah. So,
I haven't gotten too far in that review yet. I feel
Oh,
like
it's
every
all
time
right.
I try to get started, then like 10 interruptions happen. But I will
No
get
worries.
there.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right. Sounds like that's it. And we're hitting the end of time. Thank you all very much.
See y'all later.
Have a good day.